the ghostly guardian of the upper floors. When my partner and I were in the early years of our marriage, we decided to move into an apartment that was spread over 2 levels, specifically the second and third floors of the building. Notably, the building's management office and the area where we collected our mail were located just below us on the ground floor, a detail that would later prove to be quite significant. The person in charge of the building was an older lady who didn't really put much effort into maintaining the property. Most of her days were spent in her office, where she had a habit of smoking one cigarette after another, specifically Camel non-filters. Her personality was far from pleasant. She was known for her bitter and discriminatory attitudes. She reminded me of a less helpful version of Juno, the social worker from the movie Beetlejuice, but with a more unpleasant demeanor. This manager seemed to have a particular issue with us living in the townhouse. She accused us of being dishonest about my pregnancy when we moved in, as she was against renting the unit to families with children. Her attitude towards us was further soured by her making several offensive comments about my husband's racial background. Dealing with her was a constant challenge, as she was not the warmest or most welcoming individual. After our child was born, I became a full-time homemaker, dedicating my days to household chores and caring for our little one. We didn't have a car, and I hadn't made any local friends yet, so it was just me and the baby most of the time. One day, post-lunch, which is always a messy affair with a 9-month-old, I decided it was time for the baby's bath. We headed upstairs, where I prepared a warm bath, placing the baby in one of those bath seats with suction cups to keep it secure. It's important to mention that it was the middle of winter, and our apartment was freezing cold. We had been having ongoing issues with our heating system, something I had repeatedly brought up with our landlord, let's call her Juno, but to no avail. This was just one of many maintenance problems we faced, including a ceiling fan that sparked dangerously and a barely functional garbage disposal patched up with duct tape. To cope with the cold, we had resorted to using portable heaters in every room. On this particular day, I had brought one of these heaters into the bathroom to make it warm enough for the baby's bath. I made sure to place it safely on the bathroom counter, far from any water splashes. As I was in the bathtub about to lift my baby out, something alarming happened. The space heater, which had been perfectly still until then, suddenly began to rock back and forth. A wave of panic washed over me. I realized something was terribly wrong, and I had to act fast. There was no way I could get both of us out of the bathtub quickly enough to avoid whatever was about to happen. In a split second, I leaned down to grab the baby's bath seat, hastily lifting it from the tub. In a frantic move, I gently tossed my child onto the bathroom floor, just as the heater reached the end of its power cord. It hit the shower door with a thud, ricocheted off the bathtub's edge, and landed on its side on the floor, a few inches away. Thankfully, it had an automatic shut-off feature for such situations and turned off as soon as it tipped over. As I turned my attention to the corner of the bathroom, I noticed something eerie. The area seemed to be engulfed in shadows, growing darker without any apparent reason. There was no smoke, no change in the room's lighting, and no windows that could explain the sudden darkness. It was as if the shadows were filling the room on their own. Simultaneously, a distinct smell of cigarette smoke began to fill the air. It was the unmistakable scent of Camel non-filters, a smell I had become all too familiar with due to my frequent visits to Juno's office for various apartment issues. The odor was so strong and pungent that it made me cough and caused a sharp pain in my chest. Strangely, there was no visible smoke or haze to accompany this smell. Amidst this, I felt an overwhelming sense of hostility and malevolence in the room, as if someone was glaring at me with intense hatred. It was a palpable sensation, almost as if a presence was there with me, exuding animosity and anger. In a state of panic, I quickly scooped up my baby, wrapped them in a towel, and dashed downstairs. The experience upstairs had unnerved me to the point where I couldn't muster the courage to go back. To keep the baby warm and comfortable, I used some diapers from the diaper bag and kept them close, wrapped in the towel. We spent the rest of the day on the lower floor. I was too scared to venture back upstairs, especially with the baby, and I didn't want to leave them alone downstairs while I checked. Every now and then, I would glance nervously up the stairs towards the bathroom, but the fear of what had happened kept me firmly in place. When my husband came home, he immediately noticed that the baby was still in a towel and not dressed. I explained the frightening incident with the heater and the mysterious smoke in the bathroom. Assuming it was yet another problem with the apartment, he went upstairs to investigate. To his surprise, he found no signs of electrical issues or damage to the outlet. There was no trace of smoke, and the distinct smell of cigarette smoke that had overwhelmed me earlier was completely absent. He carefully placed the heater back on the counter and turned it on, watching it for several minutes. Contrary to what I had experienced, the heater remained stable and didn't show any signs of moving on its own. This only deepened the mystery of what had happened earlier. My husband didn't take my story too seriously and chuckled it off. However, later in the day, we heard a commotion downstairs near the mailboxes. It was Juno's grown-up son, raising his voice at people in a fit of anger. That's when we learned about the shocking news. Juno had suffered a severe heart attack earlier that day while she was in her office. Her son had discovered her, lifeless in her chair with a Camel non-filter cigarette still in her hand. The news was both startling and unsettling, especially considering the strange events that had occurred in our bathroom.